June 1942. The Pacific War is exploding across the map. But at the very edge of it, far from the headlines, something unexpected is about to happen. A place most Americans have never seen, barely even heard of, is about to become a battlefield. The Aleutian Islands, a chain of volcanic rock stretching into cold, empty ocean. Winds never stop here. Fog rolls in without warning, swallowing entire landscapes. Rain mixes with freezing air until it feels like needles against the skin. It is not a place meant for war, but war arrives anyway. On June 3rd, Japanese aircraft emerged through thick cloud over Dutch Harbor, Alaska. The warning comes late. Radar is limited. Visibility is poor. Then the bombs fall. Explosions rip across fuel tanks and buildings. Anti-aircraft guns respond blindly, firing into shapes that disappear as quickly as they appear. It is sudden, confusing, and deeply unsettling. This is not just another attack in a distant ocean. This is American soil. 2 days later, the invasion becomes real. Japanese troops land on Kiska, then Attu. There is almost no resistance. Small American garrisons are overwhelmed or forced to withdraw. Civilians and Aleut inhabitants are caught in the middle, some evacuated under harsh conditions, others taken prisoner. The islands fall quickly, quietly, almost unreal. For the first time since the early 1800s, a foreign enemy occupies U.S. territory. But these islands are not prizes in the usual sense. They are isolated, harsh, difficult to supply, difficult to defend. So why take them? For Japan, the Aleutians are part of a larger plan. A diversion tied to Midway, a way to stretch American forces thin. A forward position that could threaten Alaska and complicate U.S. strategy in the Pacific. But what looks good on a map feels very different on the ground, because the Aleutians fight back. Fog blankets everything. Days pass with visibility reduced to a few meters. Ships navigate through dangerous waters with almost no sight of where they are going. Aircraft get lost in clouds and never return. Even standing watch becomes dangerous as cold winds cut through layers of clothing. Japanese troops begin building defenses, bunkers dug into rocky hills, hidden positions along ridges, artillery placed to cover possible landing beaches. They prepare for the inevitable American response. But even as they dig in, the environment begins to wear them down. Cold seeps into bones. Supplies arrive late or not at all. Morale begins to shift as isolation grows. The war here is not fast-moving. It is slow, grinding, and uncertain. For the United States, the reaction is immediate but complicated. The idea of enemy forces on American land cannot be ignored. Plans are made to take the islands back. Ships are sent north. Troops are gathered. But nothing happens quickly in the Aleutians. Weather delays everything. Distance stretches supply lines. Even reaching the islands becomes a challenge. Still, the decision is clear. They will return. They will fight for every piece of ground. And they will do it in one of the harshest places on Earth. Because in the Aleutians, the enemy is not just across the battlefield. It is in the wind, in the fog, in the freezing rain that never seems to stop. And before a single major battle is fought, one truth becomes clear. This will not be a war of speed. This will be a war of endurance. By the time American forces begin building up for a counterattack, the Aleutian Islands have already proven something important. This is not a normal battlefield. It is not defined by clear front lines or fast-moving offensives. It is defined by waiting, suffering, and enduring conditions that slowly break men long before the enemy gets the chance. The fog is the first enemy. It rolls in without warning, thick and absolute, reducing visibility to almost nothing. Pilots fly blind, relying on instinct and instruments that struggle in the cold. Ships move cautiously through narrow waters, knowing that one mistake could send them crashing into unseen rocks. On land, soldiers lose sight of each other just a few steps away, voices muffled by wind and distance. Then comes the cold. It is not always the deep, dry cold of winter. It is worse. It is wet, creeping, relentless. Rain falls constantly, soaking uniforms that never fully dry. Boots fill with water. Socks rot against skin. Frostbite sets in quietly, often unnoticed until it is too late. Fingers stiffen, toes go numb. Pain becomes a constant companion. American troops arriving in the Aleutians are not fully prepared for this. Many come from warmer climates, trained for different kinds of war. Their gear is not always suited for the environment. Heavy clothing restricts movement, but without it, the cold bites deep. Every decision becomes a trade-off between mobility and survival. Even basic tasks become exhausting. Digging a trench means cutting into rock and frozen ground. Setting up a camp means fighting wind that tears at tents and scatters equipment. Cooking food becomes difficult when fires refuse to stay lit in the damp air. Sleep is never comfortable, never complete. Men wake up shivering, already tired before the day begins. And through it all, there's the constant strain of isolation. The Aleutians feel like the edge of the world. There are no cities, no civilians, no sense of normal life. Only jagged land, gray skies, and the endless sound of wind and surf. Time begins to blur. Days feel the same. Nights offer no real rest. The Japanese garrisons face the same reality. On Attu and Kiska, they dig deeper into the terrain, building defenses that blend into the landscape. Their bunkers are hidden, protected not just by design, but by the environment itself. Fog conceals movement. Terrain breaks up lines of sight. It becomes almost impossible to know exactly where the enemy is. Supply becomes a constant problem for both sides. Ships struggle to reach the islands regularly. Air resupply is unreliable at best. Food, ammunition, and medical supplies are always at risk of delay. When storms hit, and they often do, everything stops. Men wait, hungry and cold, hoping the weather will clear long enough for help to arrive. Air combat in the Aleutians is unlike anywhere else in the war. Dogfights are rare, not because the enemy is absent, but because pilots can barely see each other. Engagements happen suddenly, at close range, then disappear just as quickly into cloud. Many aircraft are lost not to enemy fire, but to the environment, crashing into mountains hidden by fog, or running out of fuel after getting lost. The psychological toll begins to show. Soldiers become tense, alert to every sound, every shadow in the mist. Friendly fire incidents occur, not out of panic, but confusion. In a place where you cannot see more than a few meters ahead, every movement feels like a threat. And yet, despite everything, the buildup continues. American forces prepare for the inevitable assault on Attu. Plans are drawn. Units are organized. Equipment is gathered, as much as conditions allow. There is no illusion of an easy victory. Everyone understands that the landing will be difficult, that the fighting will be brutal, and that the environment will make it even worse. But there is no choice. The islands must be taken back, not just for strategy, not just for pride, but because leaving them in enemy hands is unacceptable. As the operation moves closer, one thing becomes clear to every man involved. This will not be a battle decided quickly. It will not be a clean fight. It will be slow, confusing, and unforgiving. A war fought not only against an enemy you can barely see, but against a world that seems determined to destroy you first. May 1943. After months of preparation, waiting, and enduring the brutal Aleutian climate, American forces are finally ready to strike back. The target is Attu, the westernmost of the occupied islands, a cold, jagged piece of land where Japanese troops have spent nearly a year digging in and preparing for this exact moment. The landings begin on May 11th. There is no dramatic sunrise assault, no clear horizon filled with ships and planes. Instead, there is fog. Thick, heavy, suffocating fog that clings to the shoreline and rolls over the hills like a living thing. American troops move toward the beaches with limited visibility, unsure of what waits just beyond the mist. They step onto the island cautiously, weapons ready, senses strained. At first, there is little resistance. The beaches are eerily quiet. No immediate counterattack, no visible enemy. But the silence is deceptive. The Japanese are there, hidden in the high ground, watching, waiting, letting the Americans move inland before revealing their positions. And when they do, the battle changes instantly. Gunfire erupts from ridges and concealed bunkers. Machine guns cut through the fog, their flashes barely visible before disappearing again. Mortar shells drop with terrifying accuracy, guided by defenders who know the terrain far better than the attackers ever could. The Americans are forced to advance uphill, exposed, uncertain of where the next shot will come from. The terrain makes everything worse. Attu is not flat. It is a maze of steep ridges, narrow valleys, and rocky slopes that tear at boots and slow every movement. Climbing even a short distance becomes exhausting. Carrying equipment through mud and loose stone drains strength quickly. Every hill feels like a mountain. Every step forward is hard-earned. And still, the fog remains. Units become separated. Communication breaks down. Orders are delayed or misunderstood. Soldiers sometimes advance in the wrong direction, only realizing it when they stumble into enemy fire or find themselves cut off from their own lines. The battlefield becomes fragmented, a series of small, isolated fights rather than one coordinated assault. The Japanese defenders use this to their advantage. They fight from prepared positions, striking suddenly, then disappearing into the terrain. Snipers wait patiently, picking targets through gaps in the fog. Machine gun nests are positioned to cover likely approaches, forcing American troops into deadly choke points. Every advance is met with resistance that feels both invisible and relentless. Casualties begin to mount, not just from enemy fire, but from the environment. Exposure continues to take its toll. Wounded men lie in freezing conditions, waiting for medics who struggle to reach them through difficult terrain. Evacuation is slow, sometimes impossible. The line between survival and death becomes dangerously thin. Days turn into weeks. The battle grinds forward, meter by meter. American forces adapt slowly, learning to navigate the terrain, to coordinate despite the fog, to push forward even when the enemy cannot be clearly seen. Artillery is brought in where possible, though even that is complicated by visibility and positioning. There are moments of intense close-quarters fighting. Soldiers crest ridges and suddenly come face to face with entrenched defenders. Grenades are thrown at short range. Rifles fire in quick bursts. There's no distance here, no safety. Only reaction and instinct. These brief, violent encounters decide control of key positions, one hill at a time. As the Americans push deeper into Attu, the Japanese situation becomes increasingly desperate. They are cut off. Supplies are limited. Reinforcements are not coming. Still, they do not surrender. Their defense remains determined, disciplined, and at times ferocious. Every position is held as long as possible. Every attack is met with resistance. Then, in the final days of May, the battle reaches its breaking point. On May 29th, the remaining Japanese forces launch a massive Banzai charge. It comes suddenly, in the early hours, through fog and darkness. Hundreds of soldiers surge forward in a desperate, all-out assault, aiming to break through American lines. The attack is chaotic, brutal, and close. Fighting collapses into hand-to-hand combat in some areas. Rifle fire, bayonets, grenades, everything is used. For a moment, It feels like the line might break, but it doesn't. American troops hold. They absorb the attack, respond with overwhelming firepower, and gradually push back. The charge loses momentum. The attackers fall, one after another, until the assault collapses entirely. When it is over, the battlefield is silent again. But it is a different kind of silence now. The battle for Attu is finished. The island is back in American hands, but the cost is clear. The ground is littered with the dead, not just from the final charge, but from weeks of grinding combat. The fog begins to lift, revealing the full scale of what has happened. Positions that once seemed distant are now visible. The path of the battle can be traced across the landscape, marked by destruction and loss. It is a victory, but it does not feel like one, because on Attu, survival itself came at a price few had imagined. With Attu retaken, attention turns to the final piece of the Aleutian puzzle, Kiska. Intelligence reports suggest that thousands of Japanese troops are still entrenched there, waiting behind defenses built over nearly a year. After the brutal experience on Attu, American and Canadian forces expect another hard fight, perhaps even worse. Preparations begin carefully. Lessons from Attu are fresh. Troops are better equipped for the cold. Coordination is tighter. Air and naval bombardments intensify, targeting suspected positions across the island. Shells crash into ridges and valleys. Bombs disappear into the fog, their explosions echoing across empty terrain. For days the island is pounded, softened for an invasion that everyone believes will be costly. But the fog still rules Kiska. It hides everything. When the invasion force approaches in August 1943, visibility is once again limited. Ships move slowly through gray waters. Soldiers prepare for resistance they cannot see. Every man expects gunfire the moment they land. Every step is taken with tension, fingers tight on triggers. The landings begin on August 15th. Troops move ashore cautiously, scanning the ridges, the rocks, the shadows, and the mist. Units spread out, advancing inland in formation, waiting for the first shot. But none comes. Minutes pass. Then hours. Still nothing. The silence is unsettling, almost unnatural. After months of fighting and weeks of preparation, the absence of resistance feels wrong. Patrols push deeper into the island, checking bunkers, scanning defensive lines that had been mapped and targeted. They find positions, they find equipment, they find signs of life. But no enemy. The truth begins to emerge slowly, almost reluctantly. The Japanese are gone. Under the cover of thick fog weeks earlier, they had evacuated the entire garrison, thousands of troops slipping away by sea without being detected. It was a precise, disciplined withdrawal, made possible by the same environment that had made the Aleutians so difficult to fight in. The island that was expected to be another battlefield is empty, a ghost. But even without an enemy, Kiska is not safe. The fog continues to confuse and disorient. Units move through unfamiliar terrain, sometimes crossing paths without recognizing each other. Tension remains high. Every shadow still feels like a threat. And in that tension, mistakes happen. Friendly fire incidents break out. Shots are exchanged between units who believe they have encountered the enemy. In the confusion of fog and fear, identification becomes difficult. Some soldiers are wounded, even killed, not by the Japanese, but by their own side. The environment continues to take its toll as well. Accidents occur, equipment fails. The same harsh conditions that defined the entire campaign do not simply disappear because the enemy is gone. When it becomes clear that Kiska is completely abandoned, the realization spreads quietly through the ranks. There is relief, but also frustration. After everything, after Attu, after months of build-up, after preparing for another brutal fight, there's no final battle here, no decisive moment of victory. Only empty defenses and the lingering presence of those who had once occupied them. The campaign is over. The Aleutian Islands are back under American control. Strategically, it is a success. The northern threat is removed. Japanese forces are pushed back. Control of the region is secured. But the cost remains. Hundreds of American lives lost on Attu, others lost to accidents and exposure. Japanese forces nearly wiped out in their defense. And countless soldiers on both sides pushed to their limits by an environment that showed no mercy. The Aleutian Campaign fades quickly from the headlines. It does not have the scale of Midway or Guadalcanal. It does not have the dramatic fleet battles or massive offensives that capture global attention. It is distant, cold, and difficult to fully understand from afar. But for those who were there, it is unforgettable. They remember the fog that erased the world beyond a few steps, the cold that never left their bodies, the silence that could mean safety or sudden death. They remember fighting not just an enemy, but a place that seemed determined to break them. In the end, the Aleutians were not just a battlefield. They were a test of endurance, of discipline, of the will to keep going when everything, weather, terrain, isolation was against you. Victory came, but it came quietly, almost swallowed by the fog. And long after the war moved on, the islands remained as they always had been, cold, distant, and silent, holding the memory of a war that few would remember, but none who fought there could ever forget.